Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back Daily Boxing News. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Shout out to everybody in the live chat. We've got some boxing to talk about today. You can see the headline. Oleksandr Usyk training Anthony Joshua. I say training in inverted commas. There's some videos that have come out showing Oleksandr Usyk putting Anthony Joshua through his paces, teaching him some technical stuff. We know that AJ's being, well, he was for his last fight against Jake Paul, officially trained by Igor, a member of Usyk's team. But Usyk is also clearly, looking at these videos, having some input, training Anthony Joshua as well. It's really Usyk's team. Usyk himself included, probably to a minor extent, but some extent nonetheless, involved in training Anthony Joshua now. We'll talk about it. We've got some other stuff to touch on as well. We got the Luke Partridge, Johnny Partridge family feud, or what appears to be a family feud. Some people dispute it. Some people, even Jim White on TalkSport the other day, was kind of pushing the idea that it's maybe theater from the Partridges. There isn't really a feud there. And he said it a couple of times on TalkSport the other day to Spencer Oliver, because Spencer Oliver was the one, along with that young lady, I forget her name, who did the interview with Johnny Partridge the other day. And yeah, Jim White kept saying to Spencer Oliver and even to Simon Jordan, but do you believe, or can we believe the stuff that John Fury's saying here? It's a rhetorical question, right? You take everything Johnny Partridge says with an articulated lorry full of salt. Do you know what I mean? So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about Luke Partridge in an interview with Sky, which came out today, being very positive about an AJ fight. And there's only been a very few instances in Luke Partridge's career where he appeared to be actually serious about fighting Anthony Joshua. And this is one of them. And in fact, just based upon his energy towards the fight, he seems more serious about it now than ever before in his career previous. So we'll talk about that too. We'll talk about, obviously, I mentioned Usyk training AJ, or helping train him. And also, AJ being pictured with Khabib and these MMA fighters from, where are they? From Dagestan, Chechnya, whatever. The Caucasus, that region. We'll talk about that too. Is there a possibility that AJ might pivot and try his hand at MMA? I doubt it, but stranger things have happened in this world. So yeah, that's what's on the docket. We'll talk about some other boxing related topics as well, whatever you guys want to bring up. So I want to shout out everybody in the live chat. We've got Daniel Crawford, Tawheed, Gordon Dalglish, Hertgate, Isaac, MT, Truth Channel, Jay Kreps, Neil. We've got Railway Unboxing Fan, Arco, Cool Drems, Chris Lees, Irons Analysis, The Box, Atavistic Intellect. We've got Desi Desert, JR, big up JR. Hyro Protagonist, Chili Beef. Dr. Wu. Sizzler, big up. Desi says, Hatman, by the way, I think Adames would have given Crawford a lot of problems. And winning this weekend as well by KO. Is it this weekend, the rescheduled fight with Ammo Williams? It seems to have come around very quick because Ammo Williams, of course, fought a substitute opponent, it seems like just a couple of weeks ago. So they've rescheduled that very fast. Big up Gripper. Oh, it's on Saturday. Okay. Interesting. And we'll also talk about, I forgot to mention this, Jarrell Miller versus Linnea Perro. In fact, we'll start off with that. So here it is. Saturday, the 25th of April. This is being promoted by Matchroom, Eddie Hearn. I mean, you gotta laugh. Eddie Hearn, the man that said he would never work with Jarrell Miller. He said his loyalty to AJ would never allow him to work with Miller after what Miller did. Deliberately taking all sorts of substances to try and cheat and do AJ damage. Yeah, that's the loyalty of Eddie Hearn. Now, it's possible that he's cleared it with AJ, but I don't know whether that's actually the case. But from a moral perspective, you know, Hearn used to bang on all the time about how PED cheats should be banned for life. Him and Tony Bellew, they're as bad as each other. You guys remember that era where they were constantly talking about PED cheats being banned for life? And then Eddie Hearn proceeded to work with just about every PED cheat in the heavyweight division. He worked with Luis Ortiz, Alexander Povetkin, Dylan White, etc., and Jarrell Miller, etc., etc., etc. And of course, Conor Benn failed a couple of PED tests. It's always different when it's a matchroom fighter, isn't it? They're always given the benefit of the doubt to an insane extent when it's a matchroom fighter. But anybody else, oh, this is terrible. Anyway, you guys know what it is. So here we have Eddie Hearn literally promoting a Jarrell Miller fight against Linnea Perro. Now, to be fair, Perro is signed to Eddie Hearn. So Eddie Hearn could have plausible deniability by saying, yeah, I'm promoting the fight, but I'm not Miller's promoter. I'm Perro's promoter. But you're still bringing in Miller as the opponent. You didn't have to give him that opportunity. Anyway, what do I think of this fight? Well, had it been Dania Perro rather than Linnea Perro, I would have called this a gross mismatch in Jarrell Miller's favor, because the shorter of the two Perro brothers is really very, very, very limited indeed, which is surprising for a Cuban. Normally, Cubans are at least decent. Very rarely will you see a Cuban in any weight class, but certainly heavyweight, and just look at him and think, this guy's rubbish. Do you know what I mean? Like, think about it. Think of all the Cuban heavyweights there's been over the past 20, 30, 40 years. How many of them were just straight up rubbish? I'm struggling to think of even one. Like, Mike Perez was decent. He wasn't amazing, but he was decent. Jorge Luis Gonzalez, a great amateur, a decent pro. Luis Ortiz, decent. Because they're all so well schooled, you know? Odlanier Solis was decent. Again, amazing amateur, decent pro. In terms of just rubbish, it's very rare to see a rubbish Cuban fighter. But dare I say it, Dania Perro is he's close to being rubbish. At least from what I've seen of him so far, because I've seen quite a few of his fights. And as I say, he is the shorter of the two Perro brothers, an orthodox fighter. Last time I saw him, he fought some Mexican bodybuilding looking opponent, got decked, hurt bad. I think he could have got decked anyway. He certainly got hurt bad. Pretty sure he was decked. And he was a whisker away from being KO'd in that fight. He managed to pull it back. And he really didn't show much by way of skill. He just slugged it out and applied. I mean, there was some skill there, but you know, by Cuban standards, very, very limited. The brother Linnea Pero appears to be the more talented of the two, and that's who's fighting Jerome Miller. That's who Eddie Hearn has signed. 33 years of age. You can see the record on screen. Right, 13-0, 6'4.5", southpaw, 79-inch reach. He is a boxer more than a puncher, but you know, as heavyweights, there's always a little bit of pop there. His last fight was a UD over Jordan Thompson. Yes, the very same Jordan Thompson who was demolished in 2 rounds. Was it 2 or 3 rounds? Back down at cruiserweight by Jair Pataya. Absolutely wrecked by Pataya. He goes the distance with Linnea Pero. And prior to that, he fought Donnie Palmer. God, you guys remember Donnie Palmer? The previous opponent I'm not familiar with, but I know Donnie Palmer. He's like a 7-foot tall heavyweight who was knocked out by Joe Joyce and several others. I think he's American, either American or from the Caribbean, but absolutely useless. He's just a giant guy that can't fight. No disrespect. Victor Vikrist, he was a decent amateur, and there was some talk that he might do something as a pro, but he's been desperately disappointing as a professional. He was TKO'd by Linnea Pero. So those are some of the names on the record you can see on screen there. Going up against Jerome Miller now. If it was the Miller who, let's say, fought Andy Ruiz, and that was only 2 fights ago for Miller, but it was a long time ago as far as linear time, you know? What was that fight? 2023? Was the Ruiz fight in 2023 or 2024, excuse me, 2024? I think it was 2024. Very long time ago now. And Miller looked pretty good in that fight, I thought. But obviously Miller's been out of the ring a long time, and in his last fight, Hairgate, where the toupee came off, Miller looked absolutely diabolical in that fight. Was he thrown off because of the toupee? Or was it the lack of PEDs in his system? Was it the time out the ring? Was it the fact he's now 37 years of age? Maybe a combination of all those things. Chris Lees, please stop spamming the chat. You're typing too many comments. People can't get a word in edgeways. Please slow it down a bit. Slow it down. You're typing a comment like every 2 seconds. Slow it down. So, yeah, as I was saying, if it was the Miller of old, if it was, I say Miller of old, even the Miller that fought Andy Ruiz, I'd probably pick him over Linnea Pero. But based on recent form, I may be leaning a little bit towards Pero. I'm leaning a little bit towards Pero because he can box. He does have some size on him. He is, relatively big fighter. There's some level of skill there. Big up Gripper for the super chat. No comment on that one, but much appreciated for the donation. Big up Eldon Joe. We just started the stream, so we haven't spoken about much yet. This is the first fight we're discussing. Jerome Miller versus Linnea Pero. Big up Martin Colton. He says, pandemonium in the Partridge household. We'll come on to Partridge because a lot of people have got different views about what's going on there with the Partridges. Shout out to President Brush. So I'm slightly leaning towards Linnea Pero in the fight, but if Miller can get himself in the kind of shape mentally and physically that he was in against Ruiz, he can win too. Maybe he will win if he's in that kind of shape, but I gotta go off recent form and say I'm leaning towards Pero. But what do you guys think? Yes, the Partridge household. Bottle says Miller is a big mess. Since he's off the juice, his only good performance has been Andy Ruiz. Yeah, his only good performance, and we have to remember that Andy Ruiz broke his hand early on in that fight. And it wasn't any phantom hand injury. He literally showed his hand with the wraps cut off in the post-fight interview, and it looked all sorts of jacked up. So nobody can say that Andy Ruiz was exaggerating or his hand wasn't really injured. No, we saw it. And that hand looked butters. So he definitely broke his hand without any shadow of a doubt. Iron's analysis says, are they going to do a Eubank Senior and Junior where John turns up in his camper van? Cry me a river, please no. We'll come on to it. But let's get a show of hands. How do you see this fight going between Jarrell Miller and Lanier Perro? What do you guys reckon? Will Miller get it done? Or will Perro actually outbox him for the distance? Okay, that's a funny one. Frogsy says, Luke Partridge is a foul. Foul like a chicken foul. Luke Partridge is a foul, grouse, as in gross, and thoroughly unpheasant man. Boom, boom. There you go. Isaac Blinn says, Miller wins a boring split decision. Bottles got Perro winning. Iron's analysis got Miller UD. James Clifford, big up James Clifford, he's got the Cuban winning. Arco says, to be honest, maybe Luke is just maturing. Any mature person would distance themselves from someone like John. Yeah, Iron's analysis says he thinks Miller overwhelms Perro. Could well do. Could well do, but he's going to need to bring that form he was in against Andy Ruiz, because if he fought like he did against eBay, I think he's going to lose. Oh, wow. Cool Drem says Perro by KO. Without Peds, Miller is finished. That's a bold pick. You got Mojo. He's liking the music selection. Iron's analysis says, Hatman, can you make mention that Perro is clearly not 33? I'm not so sure about Perro's age, to be honest. It isn't so obvious. If he is a lot older than his age, his stated age, it isn't so obvious as it was with Luis Ortiz or even with Frank Sanchez. So I'm not so sure with him. Telstar says Miller to make Perro quit. Cool Drum says my biased love for Cuban fighters. Albie Reynolds says, however, I think Miller's hair falling out distracted people that his performance against Ibe wasn't great. It was terrible. His performance against Ibe was horrible. In fact, that might have been one of the worst performances of his whole career. It was shockingly bad. Really, really bad performance. The red triangle next to Miller's name on the BoxRec page, that's something that often happens on BoxRec. I don't know why. It's like, as soon as a fighter has had a fight, let's say in New York State, right after the fight, it's common to see that they've been banned by the New York State or suspended by the New York State Athletic Commission indefinitely, even when they haven't been suspended. So I think it's this weird glitch on BoxRec. I don't think it's actually got anything to do with anyone being genuinely suspended. Most of the time, anyway. So I think it's just this weird, because people have been talking about that for years, and there's been all sorts of random fighters where you didn't hear anything about any kind of ban. and it says suspended indefinitely by the New York State. So that's what that is. I think it's just a weird glitch. I don't think there's actually any suspension. People are asking, when's Ebenezer Tete back out? Okay, Neil's water bottle says, imagine boxer-sized Ben trains Fury again. Ben would love that. He's been dreaming of nothing else ever since they split up. All right, so let's move on from this fight then to the Partridge family feud. How many of you guys are up on this? Johnny Partridge, a.k.a. Johnny Fury, Gypsy John, 100-0 in the hard road, did an interview with Playbook Boxing, this YouTube channel here. They do pretty good interviews, to be fair. And of the many things he said in the interview with Spencer Oliver and this young lady, he said that there is basically beef between himself and his son Luke, a.k.a. Tyson. He was asked whether the riff is repairable, and he kind of was non-committal on the answer. A lot of people are jumping on this. They think it's something significant. I don't think it's something significant. It's possible, as Jim White kind of suggested, that it could be theater. It could be a fake family drama just to drum up some publicity for the Partridges. Or it could be a genuine family drama. I think either possibility is equally possible. Here's why. Several years ago, Johnny Partridge did this interview with Rob Moore. And in this interview, he made similar comments. This is 4 years ago. He said that not just Luke, all of his sons don't listen to him. They marginalize him. And there's, as far as boxing goes, they marginalize him. They push him out the way. They don't take his advice on board. And there was a video in the run-up to the Klitschko fight. It was like a behind-the-scenes thing, I think with Sky Sports. And Johnny Partridge had obviously not long come out of prison. And Luke was in the ring sparring somebody. And you had Peter Partridge, stood on the ring apron supervising the sparring. But then Gypsy John tried to intervene and get Luke to stop sparring. He told the sparring partners to get out the ring. And Peter was just stood there, not saying anything, not wanting to get into an argument with his brother. But Luke, a.k.a. Tyson, started arguing with his dad and eventually told his dad to shut up and leave me alone and I'm going to continue sparring. So, even if this is a real rift between them, it's nothing that hasn't happened before. Like, Luke Partridge knows his dad. He knows he's a pain. In fact, there was like a mini documentary that Gypsy John did on BT years ago. And in that mini documentary, I think it was narrated and presented by Steve Bunce. In that mini documentary, Johnny Partridge, Gypsy John, said that Luke told him after he came out of prison, he told him that I thought you were a complete TWAT when I was growing up. So he was literally admitting that his son told him that he didn't like him growing up. He thought he was an absolute donut, an insufferable individual. So I don't think this is anything new. I don't think it's like some kind of unusual situation for the Partridge family. Because at the end of the day, Johnny Partridge is clearly a pretty extreme narcissist. And his son Luke is narcissistic as well. He's nowhere near as extremely narcissistic as John, but he's, fairly narcissistic as well. And when you've got two narcissistic people like that in the same space, what could possibly go wrong? they're obviously going to clash. Do you know what I mean? They are obviously going to clash, even if they're father and son. In fact, even more so if they're father and son, they're going to clash. And I am absolutely certain that Luke and John have clashed many, 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 many times. I mean, at the end of the day, you got Johnny Partridge constantly for the past few years slagging off Sugar Hill, who is not only, or was at least, the trainer of Luke Partridge, but they seem to be pretty close. And here we have this disruptive force, Johnny, coming in, slagging off Sugar Hill at every turn, creating tension and awkwardness in the camp. There's no way that Luke Partridge likes that. So, this is nothing new here, folks. It's just typical Partridge family business. I don't think it's going to affect Luke in any way whatsoever. He grew up with his dad. He knows what he's like. And he knows how to deal with him. Sometimes, I'm sure, not only Luke, but maybe even Tommy, possibly Shane, they just push him away for a while when he gets too much. You know what I mean? When he's always wanting to be the center of attention, make everything about him. I mean, look, Johnny Partridge has wanted to train, be the head coach in the corner of his son Luke for years and years and years. That's what a lot of this is all about. He wants to share the limelight. He wants to be known as a great trainer. This is why he keeps banging on about, oh, they never listen to me, they never listen to me. Well, there's a reason they don't listen to you, John. Because you're an insufferable individual. He does have a lot of boxing knowledge, Johnny Partridge. But he's such a difficult character to be around. He's so egotistical. If you're a trainer, you better park the ego up. Right? The fighter is the priority. You're not supposed to be the star. So yeah, that's my take on the Partridge family feud situation. I think Luke knows his dad better than anybody. He's been dealing with him all his life. And I think this is just business as usual for them, to be honest. I don't think it's anything out of the ordinary for the Partridge family. Shout out to Anthony Palmer for the super chat. He says, never missing a stream, Hatman, big up. Who would you pick AJ over in the top 15? Personally, I'd only have Hunter, maybe Gassiev. Big up Wee Warrior. He says, many saying this is fake, but he said it all before. Indeed, as I've just outlined, he has indeed said it all before, several years ago. And I gave the receipts. The video with Rob Moore is still up on YouTube. Big up AJ in the chat. So, to answer Anthony Palmer's super chat here, I really have to get the heavyweight top 10 up. So that's what I will do. Let me take a quick screenshot and I'll get it up on screen for you guys. So we can all go through this at the same time. Just give me a second. Might need to turn the water heater off, or the water heater control in a minute as well, because this thing's starting to beep and it's annoying me. All right, just getting a screenshot. I'll get in here, center it. Okay, so who would I pick AJ over here? Who would I pick AJ over? I pick AJ over Derek Chisora. I'd pick AJ over Nelson Heiser. I mean, obviously, we've got the top 15. I think you said top 10, right? Let me just double check what you said there. Excuse me. No, you said top 15. All right. So, I pick AJ over Riakporhe. I pick him over Solomon Dakers. I'm looking at the WBO rankings now. Riakporhe, Dakers, he's already beaten Franklin, so probably pick him over Franklin again. I'll pick him over Chisora. I don't know about Anderson. Depends what kind of form Anderson's in. If he's in the kind of form he was in his last fight, might actually pick AJ. Probably pick AJ over Vianello, although Vianello might be able to cause an upset. I'll probably lean towards AJ. Who else we got here? There's some names I don't recognize. Yeah, AJ might get the better of Michael Hunter now. He definitely beat Pulev. He's beaten Pulev before. I think AJ would beat Dania Perro, to be honest. Perro's very poor. Makhmudov. Again, AJ anywhere close to his prime ruins Makhmudov. But AJ now is such damaged goods. Don't know, it's a dicey fight, to be honest. Anyone that can punch and has the reach to get to him, it's a dicey fight. But I don't know, I'll probably still just about edge AJ over Makhmudov. Yeah, those are the names I know. Well, I know many other names there, but in terms of the ones who I think AJ could beat. So the highest ranked guy that I think AJ would beat would be Derek Chisora. He's ranked number 2 by the IBF. What do you think? One second here, folks. Yeah, bring that rankings back in. Desi says, Zhang, too dangerous, so slow, but he drops everyone he fights. And AJ beat Zhang in the Olympics, and he beat him well. And he actually dropped Zhang in the Olympics. But fighters mature at different rates. I think AJ peaked, well, I know AJ peaked a lot earlier than Zhang. Not that Zhang's at his peak anymore. They're both on the way down. But AJ's looked more vulnerable than Zhang in terms of punch resistance. But Zhang has the worst stamina in the heavyweight division by a very, very long way. I mean, AJ's never had great stamina. But he's like Usyk stamina-wise compared to Zhang. Like, Zhang's stamina is absolutely shocking. Shout out to Encircled. Lennox. Encircled says, is it not possible that AJ isn't as damaged as you think, but just that Dubois is the wrong style for him? Well, it's certainly possible, yeah. Just like anyone else. I can be wrong, and I've been wrong plenty of times. So, yeah, it's perfectly possible. But that's my take on it. I think AJ is shot to bits. But his level of shotness, it's not a word, but I've just made it a word, might be masked a little bit if he fights his contemporaries. If he fights a Wilder, if he fights a White, even if he fights Partridge. The level of deterioration in AJ might be masked a little bit by that, because those guys are also deteriorating. Those guys are also the wrong side of 35. Is AJ 36 now yet, or is he still 35? I'm not sure. But when he's fighting guys the wrong side of 35, it may not be quite as apparent how shot he is. But when he fights a young guy, closer to 30 or in his 20s, I think that's when you really see how damaged he is. Atomistic Intellect says Zhang probably gets out of breath walking to the fridge and back. Okay, Encircled says he's 36. There you go. Albie Reynolds says, you said you thought he was only worth AJ fighting Journeyman or Fury. What do you mean by Journeyman? Guys like Zhang, Miller, lower key guys. No. Miller and Zhang are not Journeyman. I'm talking about an actual Journeyman, a guy who is drafted in as an opponent for prospects and stuff like that. I mean, these guys are way above Journeyman level. Dave Allen's more like a Journeyman. Is Dylan White? Maybe Dylan White could be classed as Journeyman level. Now, he doesn't have a Journeyman record. But maybe Dylan White could be classed as Journeyman level now. Dave Allen is definitely a Journeyman, yes. So let's say Dave Allen level. Anything above Dave Allen level, for me, it's just too big a risk to put AJ in a fight like that. When the Partridge fight is right there for him. Like, why risk it? Jay says AJ versus Fisher. There are not many fights out there where I would make AJ a big favorite, but the Fisher fight would definitely be one of them. Poor Johnny. I remember when Johnny Fisher was offering to step in and fight AJ in case an opponent pulled out. I forget which opponent it was. But Fisher said, I'm on standby in case the opponent pulls out. I'll step in and fight AJ at a moment's notice. And his dad was saying the same thing. Bosh. Atavistic Intellect says, does AJ beat Bacoli? The Bacoli who fought Anderson, definitely not, in my opinion. But the Bacoli who fought a Jagbar, I mean, AJ stands a chance. That's like a 50-50 because Bacoli was terrible against the Jagbar. He was even worse against Parker, but we know the reason for that. But against the Jagbar, it's like, oh my God, what has happened to this guy? He was still over 300 pounds, wasn't he, against the Jagbar? I think it was like 310. Shout out to Bexy. Down goes Johnny. That was inspired, the way I said it, by Howard Cosell. Down goes Fraser. Down goes Fraser. You guys know which fight that was? Where Howard Cosell was like, down goes Fraser. Down goes Fraser. That's right. Fraser Foreman. But which fight was it? The first or the second fight? No, it was the second fight. It wasn't the first fight. It was the second fight. Because in the first fight, there's a couple of different commentary tracks. One of them is by Bob Sheridan. And the other one, I think, is Don Duffy. There'll be the two different commentaries you can find for that first Foreman-Frazier fight. It was the second fight where Cosell was... no, people are saying it's the first. It's not. It's the second fight. And Circle says it's the first time watching it. Are you sure? No. Trollsabad says I'm pretty sure it was both. Yes, it's the second. Jay Manchester says it's the second. Cosell was it? It was. Let me check it out now, just in case I'm going mad here. I'm very sure it was the second fight, because the first fight, it's got Bob Sheridan commentating on it. Bob Sheridan and also Don Duffy. Don Duffy is not to be confused with Howard Cosell. Yeah? Don Duffy's got a different commentary style. He's more formal. The first fight was in Kingston, Jamaica. Shout out to James Clifford for the super chat. He says, has anyone checked John Fury's autobiography for an accidental Partridge reference? Unlikely, but I will check some charity shops. Charity shops. For a copy soon. Big up James Clifford. Always coming with elite sarcasm. Yeah, the first fight was in Jamaica. Now, I'm sure it was the second fight. I'm going to check right now as we speak. I'm sure it was the second fight because the first fight, there was no Cosell. Cosell wasn't commentating on the first fight. It was Don Duffy. Or there's a Bob Sheridan version. Let me check right now. I was clearly wrong. I've checked, and it is, well, Cosell is commentating on the first fight. So, yeah, I was clearly wrong. Shout out to those who corrected me. It's not Don. There may be a Don Duffy version of the first fight, too. But, yeah, there's definitely a Howard Cosell version. So, my old memory is failing me here. So, shout out to everybody who correctly said the first fight. He may have said it in the second fight as well. But yeah, that's one of the iconic commentary moments for me. And Howard Cosell had so many of them, like in the George Foreman Ron Lyle fight, where Foreman gets dropped, and then Foreman gets back up and he drops Ron Lyle, and Howard Cosell's like, and now George strikes back. Now George fought back. Yo. Now George fought back. Cosell, definitely one of my favorite commentators for the entertainment factor. It's not that Cosell was the greatest analyst or anything like that. He was just funny on the mic. He obviously had the funny rapport with Muhammad Ali. And Jay says, as I wasn't alive during the Down Goes Fraser, I prefer the Hatman version. Down goes Johnny. Down goes Fisher. No, I would not like to. People always ask me this. Would I like to work for the Zone? No, I would not like to work for the Zone. I like working for myself. I don't like being under anyone's regime. Oh, wow. That's interesting, Chili Beef. It says, according to ChatGPT, it clearly states John was named Partridge and changed it to Fury. Is that actually right? That's crazy. And Circle says it's insane how Foreman got up in that fight. It was a hell of a slugfest. Foreman actually got one of his teeth, not knocked out, but pushed up into his gum. You might see interviews about that where he talks about it. That's why when he hits the canvas, he gets dropped heavy by Lyle. And there's like blood spilling out of his mouth onto the canvas. He like drops on his face, Foreman. There's like blood spilling out onto the canvas because one of his teeth actually got jammed up into his gum. Oh, wow. Chili Beef has screenshotted it for the Element Group. So you've given me ammunition. I'm going to be trolling the Partridge fanboys with that one. Blue Tiger says, I would love to hear, down goes Partridge. Imagine if that happened against Makhmudov. I don't see it at all. I think Partridge beats Makhmudov easy, comfortable. But it's heavyweight boxing, you never know, especially at 37 years of age. Cobby Barnes says it feels like they don't want anyone with a modicum of competitive spirit for AJ's next fight. How does that build any confidence? Well, I don't think it's really about building confidence for AJ at this point. I think it's about preserving him for the big cash out. I think building confidence and all that kind of stuff is like shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. AJ had his build back after the Usyk defeats. They tried that, and they had to try it. They built his confidence as high as they could, and it still wasn't enough when he stepped up against Dubois. The man was asking people to pray for him at the weigh-in. So there's only so much you can do for the guy. At this stage, it's not about trying to build confidence. It's just about preserving him, having a little run out to see where his body's at and to see how he reacts to being hit after the car accident. And then from there, you go into the Partridge fight. Yeah, it's the big cash out. That's it. Hussein says, why is the Partridge name hidden? Because, for one, it doesn't sound like a traveler name. If I were to guess, if this Partridge thing is actually legit, and I'm not guaranteeing you that it is, again, it's just an interesting bit of information that I found at a boxing forum from a guy who seemed to know what he was talking about. He gave all kinds of backstory and detail about Johnny Fury, right? John Fury, aka Johnny Partridge, which was so detailed and so convincing. And also, I'm pretty sure I've heard Peter Fury mention in the past that there are Partridges in his family. But whether that means that his original family name was Partridge is a different thing on the dad's side. But either way, if they did change the family name from Partridge to Fury, well, Fury is a traveler name. That's like a traveler clan. Partridge, I don't think that's a traveler name, is it? I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think so. Encircled says, when he said pray for me, it sounded so strange. It did. And AJ is just a strange guy in general. A strange man. Anyone that's ever looked at his Snapchat will know how strange he is. Just a very, very odd character, his odd personality. His mind works in an odd way. That's just what it is with him. He's odd. Down goes Fraser. Down goes Fraser. Yeah, don't mind me, folks. I'll just burst out into random nostalgic commentary from back in the days. Down goes Fraser. I agree with Encircled. I hope AJ calls him Partridge if and when they fight. And I think they will fight at the back end of this year. Disaster notwithstanding. Jay Manchester says, when AJ was in that uni room telling the students to be mindful of what they say before he starts breaking jaws. Yeah, he said, when I start breaking your glass jaws. He was being trolled by those students. They were shouting stuff at him when he was walking past. And he was like, nah, I ain't having that. So he went up to their dorm room and gave them a rollicking. Like some kind of angry father. All right, so let's move on from the Partridge drama. Well, this is still Partridge related. An interview that Luke Partridge did with Sky. It was uploaded to their Sky Sports Boxing channel earlier on today. And he said he'll fight AJ next after Makhmudov. This is the first time in a very long time when he sounded positive about that fight. I mean, even when he was talking about the possibility of fighting on beyond those 2 losses to Usyk, he was just talking about an Usyk trilogy match. The rumblings we were hearing from behind the scenes were that he wasn't interested in AJ. He was only interested in that Usyk trilogy match. But he seems to have changed his tune now. Maybe he's been forced down this direction, or maybe he really fancies it now. He thinks AJ is, particularly after the, well, no, even before the accident, he was in serious negotiations to make the fight, to be fair. But with the accident, it's not going to make him less keen on fighting AJ, is it? We know how Partridge moves. It's going to make him even more keen. So, yeah, he's been very positive here about the AJ fight happening. He says he wants to get Makhmudov out the way. Then the biggest fight in boxing is himself and AJ. He repeated that on several occasions during this interview. And this is one of the reasons why I think this fight probably will happen. If not at the back end of this year, then very early next year. But I suspect it will be the back end of this year. As long as Partridge or AJ or an AJ don't suffer any injuries or defeats with their little stay busy fights in the meantime, then yeah, I reckon it will happen maybe like November, December time. Where it will be, that remains to be seen. Will it be a UK fight? In fact, it will probably be a UK fight now with all what's going on in the Middle East. And I don't think that situation is going to resolve anytime soon, folks. Unless Orange Man decides to wave the white flag, and I think that's going to go on for a long time. And that could affect shows being put on out there, obviously. So, for that reason, it might be a UK event. My prediction for Chisora Wilder is Chisora to win on points. User says AJ Fury going to be a huge fight despite them being washed. Yeah, it will be. And that's one of the reasons from a commercial perspective why you would want them to have fights before facing each other. Because then you can sell the narrative that they're both back in some type of form. Because AJ, I keep saying it, in my opinion, he's completely washed. But he's beat Jake Paul, a novice, a YouTuber, and a lot of casuals don't know what they're looking at. There were casuals out there who thought that, not all of them, maybe not even the majority, but there were some, particularly Jake Paul fans, who thought that he could beat AJ, you know? So he's smashed Jake Paul to bits. Then he's had that horrible accident. If he comes back against some journeyman level fighter, does the job there, gets another knockout, again, it can give the illusion that he's in some type of form and then generate interest and excitement among the casuals for the Partridge fight. I mean, for example, I'm about to talk about AJ training with Usyk. There was a video that I watched, a little clip of AJ being taught how to do some kettlebell exercise correctly by Usyk. And there were people in the comments saying, this is going to be, you know, the watershed moment, the turning point, words to that effect in AJ's career now that he's training with Usyk. He's going to go on to reign supreme now after Usyk retires as heavyweight champion for years to come. What? But that's the mind of a casual. I mean, a casual can make that kind of comment. They don't know what they're looking at. Big up Chili Beef for the super chat. He says, just booting up Resident Evil Requiem, boss, so catch the rest tomorrow. Thanks, Hatman, stay cool. Smash that like, lads. Yes, big up Chili Beef. And you know what? A friend of mine the other day who doesn't, I mean, he's a gamer, but he doesn't often recommend games for me to play, but he did recommend Resident Evil Requiem. He said, yeah, that Resident Evil game is good. And I told him that I'd played the Resident Evil 2 remake and I just couldn't get into it. And he was like, yeah, this Requiem is better than that. He likes to play it in first-person mode. Because I know you can switch between the third-person over-the-shoulder and first-person mode. But yeah, big up Chili Beef. So let's get a show of hands. How many of you guys think that the AJ Luke Partridge fight will actually happen, and specifically this year? Will AJ versus Fury happen this year? What do you guys reckon? Let's get a show of hands. And if you don't think it will happen this year, will it ever happen? Atavistic Intellect says, I don't think it will happen this year. Jay Manchester agrees. He thinks early next year. And Circle's 50-50. Fight Sport Talk says, I think it will happen because of money. Both guys are back in the gym. Mac B says it will happen. Maybe not this year. User says, I think Fury don't want it. If he beats Makhmudov in good fashion as I expect him to, I think he will want it. But maybe you're right and maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. Michael says no way this year. Encircled says if AJ looks good, Fury ducks. Yeah, because it is contingent on the way they perform in the next fights. If Partridge really struggles and AJ walks it and does a demolition job at his next fight, yeah, maybe Partridge does swerve it. If Partridge breezes past Makhmudov and AJ beats whoever he's going to fight, I reckon the fight will happen. Ryebread says Fury AJ never happens. Omar says probably not. Big up Luca for the super chat. He says, as much as Usyk has annoyed us all, but to hear that cretin John Partridge say he's not an all-time great was wild. Does he think his son and Wilder are? Well, he's still running with the narrative that his son won the fight. So, yeah, presumably he thinks his son is an all-time great, but Usyk isn't. But as somebody else said earlier on in the chat, none of us really take Johnny Partridge seriously anyway. He says so many ridiculous... I mean, just look at the way he talks about himself. Like he was some kind of invincible street fighter who went 100-0 on the hard road, who demolished some Irish bare knuckle champion for 100 grand. I mean, this was when he was fighting as a professional boxer. If you were fighting as a professional boxer and you're making a couple of grand to fight, because he was a club fighter, getting knocked about by Henry Akinwande and other guys, Neil Malpass, like, you get a couple of grand to fight. You get 100 grand to fight a bare knuckle champion in Ireland, and you can't remember his name? That's what you call absolute BS. All right? The man is a pathological liar. At the bare minimum, Johnny Partridge exaggerates and embellishes his story to an insane extent. And he does something similar when talking about his son's career. He embellishes and he exaggerates and in many cases just flat out lies. So it would be more surprising if he said that his son, well, excuse me, if he said that Usyk was an all-time great. That would be more surprising, given Johnny Partridge's track record. That's a great example, Luca. He said that he won the second fight. I think that was because he wasn't in the court. There you go. And some people are going to get triggered by this. But a Big Up Truth channel, he says, yes, it will happen. Some people will get triggered by this, but Kevin Rooney, not that he's anywhere near as obnoxious as Johnny Partridge, but Kevin Rooney, after Mike Tyson fired him, said that if Mike Tyson had stayed with him, he never would have lost. And the Mike Tyson fanboys take that as gospel. Well, Rooney said that if Mike hadn't left him, he'd have gone 100-0. Well, of course he would say that. How is that the same as a concrete, provable fact? Just because Kevin Rooney was salty about getting fired, and so he said, well, if Mike could stay with me, it would have gone 100-0. What a load of rubbish. A lot of trainers do that, to be fair, you know, when they get sacked. Oh, he never would have lost these fights. If I was in his corner, he would have won this and what? Yeah, okay. Encircled says, I have this strange feeling that Fury is going to have fallen off a cliff. What, against Makhmudov? You reckon Fury's going to have loads of problems or maybe lose? Do I think this version of Fury is currently the second best heavyweight? No. I'd love him to prove me wrong, but he's not going to, is he? He's not going to go out there and fight Dubois, Wardley, Kabayel, Hrgovic. You know, he's not going to fight all the people that it will be necessary to fight to prove that he's the number two. Itauma. Haters of Opinion says, I still want to see Joshua versus Luis Ortiz. Then Luis Ortiz? Hell nah, bro. Ortiz? Even Ortiz's official age is like 50 now, bro. Hell nah. Was he like 48? No, come on, bro. Nah. The other two, okay. Wilder is AJ's contemporary. So, okay, AJ could fight him. But Ortiz, no, come on, man. Ortiz? No. Shout out to Luca, he says. Oh, Matt Borgerson in the chat. Big up Matt Borgerson. He says, we aren't seeing Fury AJ. That's my hot take. Would you care to elaborate? Why don't you think we're going to see it? Mr. Lucas says, what do you make of the AJ Usyk team up? We're going to talk about that next. I got some pictures I want to bring up on screen. We're going to talk about it. That's the next topic that I got lined up here. Fernie G in the chat, he says they'll fight this year. Mac B says, Hatman, who impressed you more, Anderson before the Martin fight or Itauma at this stage? Itauma by an absolute mile. Anderson impressed me with his energy, his work rate, his athleticism, but he never impressed me technically at all. And he never impressed me as far as his mentality. Because even before the Bacoli fight, he was talking about retiring, and he was, you know, he had a hard time against Charles Martin. He was crying in his mom's arms in you know, backstage after the Martin. I was like, no, man, this guy's a mess. Itauma's much more polished technically, makes way fewer mistakes, and he isn't talking crazy the way that Anderson was talking. And he seems a lot more coachable, because Anderson was this, and maybe still is to some extent, hard-headed guy that thinks he knows it all and you can't tell him nothing. So, no, I'm much more impressed by Itauma at this stage than I was with the pre-Bacoli version of Anderson. Big up Gaz for the super chat. He says, rank these fighters best to worst. Ibeabuchi, Tua, Mercer, McCall, Holyfield, Bird. So Holyfield is number 1. Ibeabuchi number 2. Bird number 3. Mercer 4, Tua 5, McCall 6. Yeah, that's the way I'd rank them. Obviously, boxing is rock, paper, scissors. So if they were to all fight each other, some of the lower ranked guys might beat some of the higher ranked guys. You know, boxing's like that. But in terms of overall career, what they achieve, their ability, the styles and everything into consideration, that's the way I'd rank them. Holyfield first. Ibeabuchi set, and look, Ibeabuchi didn't win any version of a heavyweight title. Chris Bird did. Ray Mercer did, so that's slightly contradictory. But of course, Ibeabuchi beat Chris Bird, and he beat David Tua. So yeah, Holyfield, Ibeabuchi, Bird, Mercer, Tua, McCall. Thank you, Gaz. Great question. Trollsabad says Bird maybe 2, actually. I mean, Bird did beat Holyfield, but he beat a very diminished version of Holyfield. It wasn't Holyfield anywhere close to his best. Bird was relatively close to his best when he fought Ibeabuchi, and Ibeabuchi smashed him to bits. You know? It wasn't a shot version of Bird that Ibeabuchi fought. That was a pretty good version of Bird. And Ibeabuchi demolished the man. Had slob. You know, there's an old school term. It sounds kind of a bit sexual in today's context. But there's an old school term for a slugfest. They used to call it a slobber knocker. A slobber knocker was a slugfest of a fight because, you know, you get the slob knocked out of your mouth. And that's what happened in that fight when Ibeabuchi caught Bird with that left uppercut. Horrible. Yeah, pause. Ibeabuchi. Bird had slob. This long slob dripping from his mouth. Pause. Haters have opinions. Says, Hatman, do you think the Zone can pull in Al Heyman to join as the Avengers versus Turkey and Zuffa? Anything is possible. But Heyman operates what almost seems like a cult. With Heyman, I don't think it's just business in terms of the way he operates. There's something more than that going on. There's some kind of ideology behind a lot of the decisions that he makes, in my opinion, and the decisions that many of his fighters make, like Gervonta Davis. It's like they're part of a cult. You know, they're not thinking purely with a business mind. There's some kind of ideology behind it. We got Matt for the super chat. He says, I had a nightmare that I woke up with John Fury and a bunch of bags deciding he's going to live in my spare closet. Okay, that would be a nightmare. We got Matt. He says, John Fury reminds me of a gremlin. There are many things John Fury reminds me of. Gremlin wouldn't be the main one. Somebody just randomly who reminds me of a gremlin is Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne's like a gremlin. He's literally like a horrible little gremlin of a man. Does Lil Wayne still rap? Or has he hung up the mic? Ryan Neiman says Mark Damori would be the safest comeback for AJ. God, what a crime that would be if they dug him up again. The last time I saw Mark Damori, he was getting bashed around by Filip Hrgović. I really don't watch female boxing, Isaac Blings. It doesn't really interest me. KD says his last album was so sad. Somebody mentioning that Turkish female fighter. Yeah, I saw her last fight and I saw parts of it anyway. I didn't see the whole thing. Obviously, it was on a show that I was watching. And, I mean, she just looked diabolically terrible. It just reminded me why I don't watch female boxing. It's just terrible. I've seen better fights between 12-year-old schoolboy novices. You know what I mean? Like, no, man. You see, I don't really watch male fighters in the very lightest divisions either. But at least with them, they've got excellent technique, even if the power isn't there for most of them. And it's like watching not Tank versus Pea Shooter, but Pea Shooter versus Pea Shooter. With a lot of them lighter fighters, male fighters. So I don't watch them most of the time because of the lack of power. With so many of these female fighters, there's the lack of power and completely devoid of any technique. Now, Turhan, okay, she's got some power, but the technique is so diabolically bad that it kind of negates the power. It was horrible. Shout out to Ankito for the super chat. He says, 1988 Mike Tyson against Holyfield, Bowe, Lewis, Foreman, and Mora. Well, controversial take. The Mike Tyson fans definitely won't like this. I'm taking Holyfield over any version of Mike. I'm taking Mike over any version of Bowe. Mike versus Lennox, Prime Mike versus Prime Lennox. That's, to me, that fight could go either way. I lean slightly towards Prime Lennox, but Mike was so fast in his prime, he could overwhelm you, you know? And Lewis was a bit anxious fighting a washed up Mike for the first round. So, I don't know. That fight could go either way in my head, but I'll just lean slightly towards a Prime Lennox. I pick Mike Tyson over any version of Foreman. Again, that's a controversial one. And Mora, I mean, Mike Tyson would knock Michael Mora out in the first round. Mora doesn't have the chin or the size to be able to deal with Mike. I mean, look, he's the same size as Holyfield, maybe a bit bigger, but Holyfield had the chin, right? So you're going to have either or. You're going to either have to have the size, along with the skill, obviously, or you have to have the chin or some kind of incredible defense. Michael Mora had basic defensive ability, just kept his hands up, didn't really move his head that much. But Michael Mora was way too fragile to ever be able to withstand Mike Tyson. He get blasted out in a round. So let's move on to the next topic of conversation here. I haven't forgotten. Mr. Luca. He asked me my thoughts about AJ training with Usyk. Big up Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says, do you think Jermaine Franklin versus Itauma is being overly glazed to where they're making it seem like Franklin can win? He isn't going to last 2 minutes. Well, you would expect the promoters of the fight, Frank Warren, DAZN, the pundits who are trying to cozy up to Frank Warren and cozy up to Itauma, to overhype the size of the task in front of Itauma. You'd expect them to do that. They're promoting. And maybe casuals are falling for it, but I don't think let's get a show of hands. How many people here think that Jermaine Franklin represents a serious threat to Moses Itauma? Yes or no? Does Franklin represent a serious threat to Itauma? What do you guys think in the live chat? Yes or no? Is he a serious threat to Itauma or not? Personally, I don't think so. The reason I'm asking this question is to show you what hardcore fans think. Most hardcore fans, I don't think, look at Franklin as any kind of serious threat to Itauma whatsoever. Big up Charles B in the chat. James Clifford says no. See, everyone's saying no. And I agree. I don't think Franklin's any serious threat at all. He's too slow on his feet. I mean, his hand speed's pretty quick. But his foot speed is quite slow. He's a bit of a fat slob. Maybe he comes in better shape for this fight. And even when he does land, okay, he wobbled Dylan White a little bit, but he caught AJ flush on a few occasions, and AJ ate the shots. So unless Itauma's crazy vulnerable, I don't see Franklin really having much of a prayer in the fight. Although I don't think he'll stop Franklin in the first round. I don't think that will happen. Franklin is quite defensively cute. He knows how to look after himself in the ring. He knows how to avoid being just totally overwhelmed, Yeah, I totally agree with Matt Borgerson there, where he's saying that Franklin looked atrocious and lost in a robbery. Yeah, he did against Ivan Ditchko. And by the way, Ivan Ditchko, in case you didn't know, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this in a previous stream or video, Ivan Ditchko has signed with Zuffa. Did you guys know that? Ivan Ditchko has signed with Zuffa Boxing. That's on, because Zuffa put out a list of all the heavyweights, all the fighters they've signed so far. And on that list was Ivan Ditchko. That kind of went under the radar a little bit. Big up Goozy. Summers Boxing. Yeah, Ivan Ditchko has signed to Zuffa. I think it's a good thing for him to do. Because, again, he's one of these guys who's up there in age. He hasn't done anything as a pro yet. He was a good amateur. He doesn't have any kind of following. The clock is ticking. Yeah, he's better off signing with Zuffa. Maybe to get him active, Match him up against some of the other Zuffa heavyweights. Ryan Emer says, I think Franklin was flattered against AJ and White, both were very cautious. Itauma will let his hands go. Well, I don't think White was actually that cautious. He did try to put it on Franklin, but he's so slow, Franklin could see everything coming and was able to counter and move around and stuff like that. But I see Itauma Franklin maybe going a few rounds. I'm not putting it past going the distance, to be honest. Franklin is very, very tough. And as I say, he knows how to survive. He's very cute in there defensively. Knows how to look after himself. He's not a shot fighter like Dillian Whyte. He's not a guy that's been getting knocked around and wobbled in every fight. No, I mean, with the exception of maybe being slightly wobbled against Dillian Whyte, I don't think I've ever seen Franklin look remotely hurt in the ring. So, I wouldn't be surprised if it goes rounds. Big up Matt, he says, AJ always looks like he's thinking too hard when he's boxing. He always looks uncomfortable, always looks that way. Yeah, he's looked that way for most of his career. And we've all been trying to guess at why. Because when he was on the way up, he looked very comfortable. Even when he fought Dillian Whyte, he looked comfortable. He had a look of menace in his eyes. But people say the Vlad fight was the turning point. Like after the Vlad fight, he was never quite the same. Maybe it was a slight turning point, but I think the real big change and the real big shift in AJ's demeanor came after the Ruiz fight. In fact, before the Ruiz fight, on the way to the ring, he had that worried look, anxious look in his eyes and on his face. And AJ's never really been the same since, has he? Since the ring walk for the first Ruiz fight, he's always had this deer in the headlights, scared kind of look in his eyes. Another fighter that used to have that, I'm not sure how many of you guys will remember this, was Peter Quillin. You guys remember Peter Quillin? He always used to fight with a look on his face like he was terrified. His eyes are like wide open when he fought, and he had this just mad anxious look about him. It was so weird. KO Talk says, AJ looks uncomfortable, full stop. Weird guy. That's a whole fact. He is an awkward guy, isn't he? He's a weird, uncomfortable guy. So, AJ training with Oleksandr Usyk. Usyk having some hand in actually teaching AJ stuff in the gym. What do I think of it? I think there are few people better qualified in the world to tell AJ exactly what he's doing wrong and how he can correct it than Oleksandr Usyk. He shared the ring with AJ twice. He studied him. He knows exactly what mistakes AJ makes, how to capitalize on those mistakes. It's like when, it's similar, not exactly the same. Manny Stewart trained Oliver McCall for the first Lennox Lewis fight. Obviously, McCall knocked Lewis out in 2 rounds. And then immediately after that fight, Lewis hired Manny Stewart. He jumped ship. In the mind of Lennox Lewis, it was like, well, who better to train me than the guy that trained McCall to beat me? Because he knows all my flaws. Similar concept with AJ. He knows Usyk knows all his flaws. He's exploited all his flaws in the ring twice. He knows the areas that AJ needs to improve on. So that's the first thing. The second thing is Usyk's obviously a boxing genius. The third thing is the work rate, the work ethic in Team Usyk is sadistic. And although AJ's a hard worker, sometimes you can work hard, but you're not working smart. Maybe you're working hard on the wrong things. AJ's a guy that likes to do all this scientific training. Okay, maybe he's doing the wrong kind of scientific training. maybe the scientific training that Usyk and his team do will yield better results. So I personally think it's a good move. AJ's training with Usyk. Igor, I think that's the guy that's officially Anthony Joshua's training out. Igor, he was in the corner for the Jake Paul fight. And obviously AJ's getting input from other members of Usyk's team, including Usyk himself. I think it's a good move, especially since the end game, the end goal, is to fight Luke Partridge, aka Tyson Fury. It's like the Rocky movies, you know? When Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed team up and they both attempt to beat Ivan Drago. Well, in this case, Usyk's already beaten Luke Partridge. So now he'll be mentoring Anthony Joshua to try and do the same thing. And as much as Partridge says, and this is what he said in a recent Sky interview, it's not going to help AJ, I think it will help him. And I think it will bother Partridge to some extent that Usyk is in AJ's corner. I think it will bother him. Partridge is a very, very mentally strong fighter. We know that. He's a great big occasion fighter. But he's deeply, deeply upset by those 2 losses to Usyk. Deeply upset. So I'm not saying that having Usyk in Joshua's corner will scare Luke Partridge. I think it will maybe irritate him more than anything. And since he's come up with this silly notion that he was jobbed on the cards, it might even put that in his mind as well. Like, if this fight with AJ goes the distance because he's got Usyk in his corner, maybe they'll give it to him. So, yeah, I don't think it will scare Partridge, but I think it might irritate him. The Usyk's in AJ's team, you know what I mean? I think it will irritate him a little bit. And Usyk knows better than anyone that one of the main reasons he was able to beat Luke Partridge, obviously there's the skill aspect, but it was making Partridge work for every minute of every round. And the maniacal training that they're having AJ do there in that camp, I think the emphasis when he fights Partridge is on keeping Partridge under pressure. I don't think they're going to send AJ in there with the game plan of trying to box on the outside, or even if he does apply pressure, trying to be too perfect about it. But just go in there and make sure that Partridge is having to throw punches constantly to keep him off. I think that's what the game plan will be with Team Usyk. And because AJ is so much bigger than Usyk, he doesn't have to work as hard to get close. So even though he's never going to have Usyk's engine, perhaps they don't think he needs to have Usyk's engine. He just needs to improve his engine from where it is now, condition himself to fight a certain type of fight. So I suspect that's what's going on. And like I say, as AJ's swan song, which is what I expect the Partridge fight or potentially fights, you know, let's say they have 2 fights to be, I think it makes logical sense to have Usyk as part of the team and to be training in Usyk's camp. I think it makes perfect sense. Now, there was somebody who was speaking to Eddie Hearn in an interview earlier on today, one of these guys that's got a YouTube channel, and he asked Eddie Hearn whether he thought that it's a mistake AJ training with Usyk because he might try to make AJ too technical and he won't be the knockout puncher that he used to be, and he needs to be that kind of knockout puncher. Well, firstly, I think he's not giving, that guy who asked the question is not giving Usyk and his team enough credit. I think they know what they're working with AJ. I think they're very smart boxing people. And for 2, people, even now, after what Usyk did to Partridge twice, seem to be completely, some people, not all people, seem to be completely missing the fact that Usyk stuck it on Partridge. He didn't go in there and like fiddle his way through those fights, did he? He stuck it on him. So Usyk and his team know all about how to stick it on an opponent. I don't know where this notion ever came from. And obviously that notion was dispelled for the world to see ahead of the first Usyk-Partridge fight. But there was so many. The only person that I saw, the only two boxing people that I saw who seemed to understand that Usyk was going to be aggressive was Duke McKenzie, and to his credit, boxer-sized Ben, as people call him, Ben Davison. Ben Davison was saying in the run-up to that first Usyk-Partridge fight, I don't know why people are acting like Usyk is a runner. He's actually really aggressive. And it was a baffling thing. People acting like Usyk is some kind of Pernell Whitaker or something. He can box like that. But if you look at his track record, he doesn't tend to box like that most of the time. He tends to stick it on you in a very technically correct way, but he's always applying pressure. And that's what Ben Davison expected against Partridge. That's what Duke McKenzie expected. So obviously people saw that in the first fight, the second fight, but there's still some saying, oh, well, you know, if AJ trains with Usyk, won't they try and make him too technical and not aggressive? Like, Usyk is aggressive. Where did this notion come from that Usyk ain't aggressive? Usyk is aggressive. Yes, we're talking about Fury, Luke Partridge. Encircled says, also Partridge will have worse stamina than he did a couple of years ago. That's a good point. Let me just refresh my Firefox tab. Apologies if there were unread super chats or comments. Just refreshing my tab here. Why can't I read Matt's comment here? Hang on. It's because my mouse has fallen down. One sec. All right, there we go. Now, I saw Matt's comment, already read that one. Big up Matt Borgerson. That Franklin looked atrocious and lost in the robbery. That's right. Spoke about that one. So, yeah, that's Usyk. And if you notice, he's orthodox. So he's really trying to teach AJ what to do. It's not like he's teaching AJ how to defend against a southpaw. He's teaching AJ what to do from an orthodox position. And here, there's a team photo. Now look at Usyk's eyes and look at AJ's eyes. AJ is wearing a look of menace in his eyes there, just like Usyk is. Will we see that look of menace in AJ's eyes for the first time in a very, 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 very long time in his next fight? Or will it be the wide-eyed, deer in the headlights look that AJ's been wearing for, best part of 7 years? What do you guys think? So King James says Ngannou would get poleaxed by the Rumford Bosch. Fury arguably lost. Yeah, I don't think the Rumford Bosch would poleax Ngannou. Personally, I don't see it. The Rumford Bosch nearly got poleaxed in his last fight against some random. So no, I don't see that. I mean, that being said, Ngannou's pretty old now, isn't he? And he's not that active. I mean, I know he's had an MMA fight, what was it, 6 months ago or something, 4 months ago? King James says Fisher stops Ngannou badly. I don't see it. Yeah, I agree with Mr. Luca. Johnny Bosch is beyond useless. Comes across as a really nice guy, but he's useless, bro. Isaac Bling says, Hatman, I'm surprised you said that Fisher will totally KO Ngannou in boxing. Really? So all of a sudden Fisher can do what AJ did? Fury had all those problems with Ngannou, but Bosch is just going to come in there and piece him up? Like, did you just see what Johnny Bosch didn't do against Dave Allen? Dave Allen, somebody who doesn't throw any damn punches. Dave Allen is a journeyman. A limited journeyman at that. In that rematch, he smashed Johnny Bosch to pieces. Even that random that Johnny Bosch fought in his last fight, he nearly knocked him out. Johnny Bosch is atrociously bad. Again, I feel kind of bad saying that since he always comes across as such a nice guy. You know, just being real, like in terms of his ability, he's shockingly bad. Yeah, Fury didn't take Ngannou seriously. I agree with that. But I don't care what version of Fury you have. There's no way that he would have struggled with Johnny Bosch the way he struggled with Ngannou. Johnny Bosch isn't as big as Ngannou in terms of reach or body weight. He's not as physically strong. I don't think he takes the kind of shot Ngannou takes. So, no, I totally disagree on that. I'm surprised that people think that Johnny Bosch would do him, to be honest. It's like, Johnny Bosch is useless, bro. I agree with Encircled. Johnny Fisher boxes like he just learned the basic concept of boxing 1 minute before he got in the ring. Even though Ngannou's not a boxer, he is a high-level combat sports guy. But as much as you can bash Ngannou, I would say that Johnny Bosch is worse. So it's not like I'm trying to refute what you're saying. I'm telling you that Johnny Bosch is even worse than that. This is not an argument between Ngannou's actually pretty good and no, he's rubbish. No. This argument is, yeah, Ngannou is a novice and he is useless in boxing, but Johnny Bosch is even worse. That's what the argument is. Or my argument. Johnny Bosch is even worse. Michael says, AJ is in Ukraine with Usyk, just saw it on Instagram. He's in that actual country? You sure he's not in Spain? Because if they've gone to the actual country, I mean, that's alarming. Has AJ got survivor's guilt? That's a question for you guys. Anyone think that AJ's got survivor's guilt? I always find survivor's guilt to be a strange thing. You know, the only way I can really understand survivor's guilt is if, like, you're a parent and you're in a situation where your child dies and you survive, then you might have survivor's guilt, or some other beloved family member. Do you know what I mean? But if you're just in there with a bunch of randoms and you survive and they don't, why would you feel guilty? I mean, with AJ, it was his friends, right? I'm not talking about his case. But for example, somebody who is in a plane crash and they're the only survivor and all the other hundreds of passengers die and they have survivor. Like, why would you have survivor's guilt? I don't get it. Shouldn't you be elated how lucky you were to survive when everyone else didn't? Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, with AJ, it's a different story because it's his friends. And as somebody said there, maybe because he changed seats. Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. Oh, well, somebody in the chat says they're in Ukraine right now and it's not that bad at the moment. Okay. Reporting from the front lines. Yeah, I've seen the video. Somebody posted it in the Element group. Waved. I've seen the video. Shout out to Striker. Down under. Casa says, AJ once hurt is almost always exhausted. And I guess you mean to say it's too telling to his opposition. So when he gets hurt, it's very easy for his opposition to see because he's so exhausted afterwards. It's like a red rag to a bull, isn't it, when AJ gets hurt? Some fighters disguise being hurt very well. AJ is not one of them. Okay, people are saying RIP Chuck Norris. Yeah, why do people keep doing this? Because a couple of streams back, there were people popping up in the chat saying, AJ Dylan White is done. It's signed, it's official. And when I asked them for a source, they said, oh, some guy on Twitter. That's not a source. Or, well, it's not a source that you should be trusting anyway. Some random boxing account on Twitter is saying it's signed. Like, people just do that for clout and attention. God damn it all. It's not hard to find out if a fight has been signed. And people always quote from these random Twitter accounts, you know? I don't get that. Just go to AJ's account, go to Dylan White's account, go to Eddie Hearn, Matchroom. And if you're not going to the horse's mouth, at least go to somewhere like TalkSport. Yeah? They're not always going to get it accurate, But there's a much higher chance that TalkSport will be reporting something accurate than a random boxing, whatever, Twitter account. There's so many of these silly accounts on Twitter, or X as they call it now. And there was one account, I can't remember the name of it now, Boxing something. And they used to just tweet the most amount of absolute diabolical rubbish, claiming that this fight is signed and this is official and that's official. And some people used to repost this in my Discord group when I used to have Discord, and then later on in my Element group. And I'm like, bro, why are you even reposting from that Twitter account, bro? Like, I don't get it. That's not a credible account at all. This ain't Michael Benson. You guys remember Michael Benson? He was a pretty reliable source on Twitter. Coppinger, when he used to be on Twitter. I don't know about Coppinger now, but Coppinger before, when he was working for ESPN on Twitter, he was pretty reliable too. Coppinger, Benson, Steve Kim. Who else was pretty reliable journalists on Twitter? Coppinger, Benson, Steve Kim, even Dan Rayfield. So if it's coming from one of those guys, I'm not saying they're always 100% right, but, you might want to retweet it, you might want to repeat it and say it's coming from this guy, let's see if it turns out to be true. But these random, faceless Twitter accounts, come on, bro, you should know better than that. Say this is gospel from some random Twitter account. Nah, let's not do this. So yeah, anyway, long story short, Eddie Hearn said there is absolutely no truth whatsoever to AJ versus White being signed. There hasn't even been any negotiations. Imagine that. Not even one conversation, according to Hearn at least, right? He says there's no truth to it at all. Yeah, what has happened to Benson? Where is he? Because Benson used to work for TalkSport, right? And then his account was bought by The Ring. And since then, he's disappeared off the face of the earth. Where is Michael Benson? The box says he works for Ring Magazine. I guess behind the scenes then. Because we don't see him tweeting anymore. Matt Borgerson says Hearn wouldn't tell you the truth anyway. Yeah, well, Eddie Hearn's obviously very selective with the truth, that's for sure. But he said something very specific there. He said there's been no, and he was categoric, there's been no conversations at all about a Dillian Whyte fight. It's not signed, there's no negotiations, there's no conversations, there's nothing. Yeah, I just mentioned that, Sean. Well, he didn't change his account to Ring Magazine. As I understand it, Ring Magazine bought his account. So I don't think it's Michael Benson tweeting anymore. It's someone else. Matt says he got paid $10 million for his account, not even kidding. I don't know whether I believe that. Who would pay $10 million for Michael Benson's Twitter? I find that hard to believe. Matt says, Eddie is a performer, he's meant to say that. Yeah, but I've followed Eddie Hearn's career since the very beginning. So I know think I can read him pretty well now. When he's lying, when he's spinning a yarn, and when he's actually being truthful. And on this occasion, I think he's being truthful. That's my take on it. I think he's being truthful. Ben Odom says 10 million CDs. For those who don't know, that's the currency of Ghana. Matt says they bought Rummy's Corner too. That's news to me. Wasn't aware of that. Will Team Usyk focus on faith? I don't know, man. Usyk doesn't strike me as the evangelical type. Obviously, his faith means a lot to him personally. Maybe to his team too, I'm not sure. But he doesn't strike me as the type that's going to try and, stop preaching to you. So, I mean, who knows? Will the passing of AJ's friends help him? Well, somebody earlier on in the chat said that AJ's now got the I don't give a F attitude. And an incident like that can do that to some people. I mean, this is not a real world example. It's kind of a silly example, but I'm going to give it anyway. Has anyone seen the movie Kung Fu Hustle? So in Kung Fu Hustle, you've got this kind of loser character. Shout out to Matt Borgerson. I'll come on to your super chat in a second. You got this kind of loser character in Kung Fu Hustle who basically wants to be somebody, and his first objective when he wants to be somebody, his first attempt to try and become someone, is to get into the criminal world. And he tries and tries and tries to be accepted by criminals, and it all goes horribly wrong. And it culminates in him being beaten almost to death by some kung fu genius called the Beast. But what happens is when he gets beaten nearly to death, it unlocks his, what do they call it, chi energy or ki energy, however you pronounce it. I'm sure you Chinese kung fu aficionados will tell me the correct pronunciation, ki or chi. It's spelled in English, C-H-I usually. Anyway, it unlocks his chi energy. And when he emerges like a butterfly from a chrysalis, from his bandages, he's like the greatest kung fu genius to ever have existed. Because that beating unlocks something in him psychologically, spiritually, And again, it's a silly example, but sometimes things like that can happen in real life, where a tragedy, an extremely traumatic event, it can send you extremely in one direction or the other. It can send you into extreme depression and your life can absolutely become devastated, or it can send you on this upward trajectory to an extent that you've never been before. It can energize you, It can shake you up and whatever to such an extent. Maybe it shakes you loose. Because AJ's always been a very uptight character. Maybe that situation has made him say, yeah, I don't give a F anymore. I'm not going to worry anymore. Whatever will be, will be. I'm not going to be asking people right before the opening bell, how do you think I should tackle this fight? Maybe it'll stop him overthinking. All we can do is speculate. We won't know until he gets in the ring, but it's a possibility. That's what I'll say. Big up Matt, he says, I was so sad when Rummy sold out to the ring. Rummy's Corner was the straight truth for predictions. That man had to be in his 70s. Oh, wow, they're saying the Beast actually passed recently. The guy who played the Beast in Kung Fu Hustle passed. Okay, very good, King James, very good. He says, did you hear the Saudis couldn't buy Dan Raphael? He asked them to cover his groceries and restaurant tabs for life, and they couldn't afford it. That's crazy. That's crazy. Oh dear. What does Dan Raphael actually eat? Sometimes, you know, in my mind, somehow I'm stereotyping him as an Italian American, thinking he eats just mostly Italian food. Because, you know, Italian Americans in particular are always like gushing about their food and talking about their food, you know, the traditional Italian food. I'm sure Italian Americans eat all sorts of different types of food, right? What do you guys think Dan Raphael actually eats? Because he is enormous. The box says it's easier to ask what he doesn't eat. President Brush says lasagnas with 12 different cheeses. Shout out to Ankito for the super chat. He says, I know this won't actually happen, but wouldn't it be ironic if Usyk trains AJ and they somehow fight in the future and AJ wins? That would be wild. That would be the craziest plot twist in heavyweight boxing for decades. That would be really wild. Even Usyk wouldn't see that one coming. Because I'm assuming, but I feel sure in this assumption, that Usyk doesn't believe he and AJ are ever going to fight again. I'm sure he doesn't believe that. Because in his mind, he's fighting this kickboxer, then maybe the winner of Wardley Dubois, particularly if it's Wardley, then he's going to fight maybe Partridge or Caballero and call it quits. I don't think AJ is in his plans at all. And that's one of the reasons I think AJ's been graciously welcomed into his team, and even Usyk has given him some pointers and tips. If he still saw AJ as a potential rival, I don't reckon he'd be doing that. But yeah, that'd be a crazy plot twist. Big up James Clifford for the super chat. He says, can we have your prediction as to in what order these promoters will expire? Okay, that's a morbid question. Barry Hearn, Bob Arum, Bricktop, Al Heyman, and Don King. Get the likes up. Okay, that's quite a tough one. I think Arum. No. Let me remix it. I think King and Arum are like the same age. Maybe they're a year or two apart, but they're pretty much the same age, both in their 90s. I'm going to say, I mean, the thing that is making me hesitate to say King first is because he's a psychopath, and psychopaths have this way, even when they're totally senile, of holding on. Because they want to con just that one last person. You know, they've got a reason for living because they want to F over one last person. You know what I mean? That's what keeps them going. can't die yet. I've got to F this person over. So I don't think Bob Arum really feels that way. So maybe Arum, then King. Between Bazza and Bricktop, I'm not sure. Because although Bazza's older, I think Bricktop is more stressed. And he's already had a heart thing, but I think Bazza's had some surgeries and stuff like that. So I go King, Arum. We'll go Bazza, Bricktop, Heyman. Big up James Clifford for the morbid question. Shout out to the Sweet Maths for the super chat. He says, Frank and Bob look 10 years younger than their actual age. Purpose in life keeps you young. They really do. I mean, Bricktop has barely aged in the past 20 or 30 years. It's actually bizarre. If you go back 20 years, I'm telling you, Bricktop barely looks any different. That is bizarre. Like, Hearn has aged more in the past 10, 15 years than Bricktop has. And Hearn's like way younger. Hearn's, what is he, 46? Hearn has aged way more than Bricktop has. How's that possible? In Circle says it's pure bitterness that is preserving him. Goozy says Don King goes first. Well, Don King is definitely in far greater cognitive decline than Arum. That's why I wanted to say King first initially. Because, you know, Don King is completely incoherent at this point. He's not so much in the public eye. When they wheel him out, it's like, oh dear, this man has lost it. Arum is still coherent, but he just talks very slowly. You know? So Arum comes across a lot better than King. But like I say, King's a psychopath. And psychopaths are very stubborn creatures. Do you know what I mean? So even though he seems to be in far worse cognitive shape than Arum, it'd just be typical of a psychopathic individual like that to hang on a bit longer. For all we know, that's what's keeping him going. Maybe he wants to outlast Arum, and if Arum goes before he does, maybe he'll be like, okay, now I can die. You don't know with these kind of people. Shout out to the Sweet Maths. And Circle says Don King would try to rip the devil off if he could. Yeah, I spoke about the apparent fallout between Tyson and John, or Luke and John, earlier on. If you rewind the stream, you'll hear me talk for quite a while about that. Yeah, Arum is declining too, for sure. But if you see him in interviews, he makes a lot more sense than Don King. He seems more present than Don King. Don King is completely checked out. Like, it's just pure psychobabble. I mean, he was always psychobabble in Word Salad with King, even in his prime. But it was more coherent than now. And Don King's shows look like something literally lifted from the early 1990s or 80s. Bizarre, right? The whole ring, the setup, the press conferences, everything with a Don King show today looks like something out of the 1980s. So he's gone. Do you know what I mean? He's not present in the current day at all. He's living in some kind of weird 80s, 90s time warp in his own mind. Whereas Bob Arum is present. Do you know what I mean? He knows what year it is. Shout out to Jake Jones. Am I a fan of Tarantino? Not particularly. I loved Pulp Fiction. For me, that's one of my favorite movies of all time, Pulp Fiction. But other than Pulp Fiction, most Tarantino movies for me are take it or leave it. They're just, Some of them are pretty horrible. Others are decent-ish. But for me, the Tarantino formula never worked as well before or since as it worked with Pulp Fiction. That was just the perfect embodiment of what Tarantino has always tried to be. Other Tarantino movies like Django was okay. Kill Bill, it's alright. The Kill Bill movies. Some people really like Jackie Brown. You know, Jackie Brown had its moments, but it's no Pulp Fiction. What do you think, Jake Jones? Are you a big fan of Tarantino movies? What are some of the more recent movies he did? The Hateful Eight? He didn't direct From Dusk Till Dawn. I think he produced it or helped write it or something like that. That's right, Goozy. Pulp Fiction was a game changer. And that's what some people who watch it today for the first time maybe won't get from it, is how much of a game changer it was. It really changed the way that people make gangster movies completely. Because before Pulp Fiction, gangsters were serious 100% of the time in all gangster movies. The ones I saw anyway, right? In the overwhelming majority of them, the gangsters were always serious. You never saw them having these kind of irreverent, silly conversations about foot massages and buying beer in Amsterdam and all this kind of stuff. You didn't see gangsters behaving like that in movies until Pulp Fiction. And after Pulp Fiction, it's like everyone was doing it. Jake Jones says, favorite Pulp Fiction character? Yes, I love his stuff. I think his dialogue is unmatched. For me, my favorite dialogue would be in classic Scorsese movies, and also, but who's the guy that directed Carlito's Way? He also directed Scarface. Why have I forgotten his name? The dialogue in his movies was also always fantastic. Goozy says mixing storylines was the changer, I believe. Well, that had been done in other movies, though. Pulp Fiction was like a cult. I can't really call it cult because it was a big movie. It was very popular, but it was a culturally impactful movie. Pulp Fiction, very culturally impactful. When it came out, people were selling Pulp Fiction posters and T-shirts and all that kind of stuff. Every teenager had some kind of, Pulp Fiction merch. Yeah. So it really infiltrated popular culture, Pulp Fiction. And so it brought that type of movie with a non-linear story to wider, into the wider public consciousness. But there have been many movies that have done stuff like that before, where they don't tell the movie in sequential order. for me, the game-changing part was just the way gangsters were portrayed. I'd never seen anything like that before. I'd never seen a movie where gangsters are about to go on a hit and they're having this kind of, casual conversation about irrelevant chit-chat. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it. You never saw in movies prior to that gangsters on their downtime, chilling, laughing and joking and just being normal people. And yeah, the dialogue was fantastic in classic. Absolutely insanely classic in Pulp Fiction. But that's another thing. I mean, when was the dialogue in Tarantino movies before or since ever as good as Pulp Fiction? Jackie Brown never had that kind of dialogue. It's like one or two lines that were okay, but Pulp Fiction just had so many classic one-liners. And Brian De Palma, thank you. Brian De Palma. His movies always had great dialogue as well. Jake Jones says, Pulp Fiction ran at the cinemas for 7 months. Is that right? I never actually watched it at the cinema. I saw it on video cassette. My favorite Pulp Fiction character got to be Jules. Samuel L. Jackson's character. And Jules was the most iconic character in Pulp Fiction. I would say the two most iconic characters in pop culture from Pulp Fiction at the time were Jules and maybe Mia, played by Uma Thurman. Because they were the ones that you'd see on posters the most. Yeah, sometimes you'd see John Travolta's character as well. But more often it would be Jules and Uma Thurman's character, Mia. Those are the two posters and t-shirts and all that kind of stuff you just see constantly. But it was full of great characters. I mean, the boxer, played by Bruce Willis, was a great character. Travolta's character was great. I mean, all the characters in there were memorable. Tim Roth's character, Ringo. It's full of great characters. Well, Google says Tarantino's style borrowed from earlier Hong Kong cinema. I didn't like Inglourious. No. See, the thing with Tarantino for me is that Pulp Fiction was so impactful because it really embodied the spirit of the 1990s. The 1990s, see, there are many decades which at the time viewed themselves as cool, but in retrospect, they were not cool at all, right? They were cheesy as hell, corny as hell. But the 90s viewed itself as cool, and even in retrospect, it still looks cool, all right? And Pulp Fiction was just a cool movie that embodied the spirit of the 1990s. You know, this changing world where we're coming out of the 80s and all the cheese of the 80s. The 80s was great, but it was a very cheesy decade. It was the decade of cheese. And Pulp Fiction like embodied Western culture coming out of its infancy and into its adolescence almost. Do you know what I mean? It's like Pulp Fiction was the embodiment of that. The cinematic embodiment of it. Of like a coming of age decade for Western culture. in many ways. I mean, you can call it coming of age, but at the time, for pop culture in the West obviously changed from the 80s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. And at the time, it was a culturally impactful, culturally iconic movie, Pulp Fiction, you know? Matt says The Fifth Element was the greatest movie of all time. Okay, well, it's all subjective, but I wouldn't put The Fifth Element in my top 50. Never mind my number one, but there you go. Different strokes for different folks. It's got, it's the movie where they got Chris Tucker in a bizarre outfit with like bleached blonde hair. It's just, I never vibed with that movie, The Fifth Element, because I know a lot of people love it, but to me, it never resonated with me, that movie. Yes, I've seen The Witch. That's a pretty good film. Robert Eggers. Yep, I've seen that. I liked Nosferatu as well. I liked The Northman. The Northman is Robert Eggers, isn't it? I know The Witch was. And Nosferatu was, but is The Northman also Robert Eggers? Or am I getting my wires crossed here? Either way, I like that movie too. Okay, it is. Yeah. Well, Guga says, I didn't like the original Blade Runner much, but some rate it as a top sci-fi flick. Well, the original Blade Runner kind of encapsulates Ridley Scott as a director. His movies, for the most part, are style over substance. Yeah. I said it. Most Ridley Scott movies are style over substance. There's not much substance there. There's been the odd exception, such as Alien and Gladiator, the first movie. But other than that, Ridley Scott is a style over substance guy. And Blade Runner was really style over substance. I mean, there was some nice ideas there, but the execution for me was never like really profound. But the art style that Ridley Scott came up with in that movie was why it became a cult classic. Because he created a world which was just very visually interesting. So it was a sci-fi classic from that perspective. It did influence. And in fact, Ridley Scott has claimed that he basically created the whole cyberpunk thing unintentionally with his art direction on that movie. Because for those who don't know, Ridley Scott is not just a director. He directed thousands of television commercials before he ever made a movie. And he's a camera operator, and he was very hands-on as far as art direction as well. And so he says that he claims he basically, seeded the whole cyberpunk aesthetic with Blade Runner. Maybe he's telling the truth. Because certainly after that, people were trying to emulate, music videos and stuff like that. A lot of the stuff that they saw in that movie. So yeah, it was impactful, not because the story was so compelling or the acting was so compelling. It really wasn't. But the music was great and the visuals were spectacular for the time. As other people have said on previous streams, the sequel's actually better than the first movie. Blade Runner 2049, it's actually objectively a better movie. Better dialogue, better acting, better performances, more interesting story. Striker says it's a fair call that he created the cyberpunk genre. All right, peeps, I'm going to bring this stream to a close. I'd like to give a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were Gripper, Anthony Palmer, Wee Warrior, James Clifford, Chili Beef, Luca, Matt Borgerson, Gaz, and Keto. James Clifford, the Sweet Maps. Big up, big up. And shout out to everyone else who joined the conversation. Until next time, take care, be good. I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.